My sister helped my parents destroy my face with illegal skin whitening cream, so I cut them all off for good. 2 years later, my sister came crawling back, terrified and begging for help. My family are the most racist people I've ever met. Whenever we went outside during summer, my mom would count the number of times that me and my older sister stepped out of the shade. And when we got home, each time was equal to one hard slap. And for years, our morning routine consisted of our mom rubbing skin whitener from the Dollar Tree all over our bodies. And the whiter we looked, the better treatment she would give us. I remember just always wanting to be a normal kid. But my sister, on the other hand, she was a whitewashed queen. Every night, she would set an alarm for every 2 hours to make her sleep as disrupted as possible. That way, she was exhausted all the time, which naturally made her look more pale. Like, what in the bombaclot? And instead of our parents telling her that her health was more important than making sure she didn't look Hispanic, they would treat her like royalty. They'd shower her with beautiful dresses, expensive jewelry, literally just anything she wanted. Soon it became clear who the golden child was, and if I wanted their love, this is what I had to do. But I was desperate to find other ways. Getting straight A's in school, cleaning the house top to bottom every weekend, giving my parents foot massages. Thanks, honey, but I really wish you worked this hard on getting beautiful pale skin like your sister, they'd always say. And after my parents got me a literal bleach hair product shipped from Africa for my 16th birthday, I spent the entire day crying into the Barnes & Noble's teddy bear in my room, and that's when my sister came in and hugged me. I figured she was going to say that she'd always be there for me, that beneath the skin color I was still her sister, and that was all that mattered. But no, Layla, I love you and I want to help you. Look at me. I stared at her malnourished self, the eye bags forming crates under her eyes, the chemical burns on her scalp from straightening her hair. If I can look this beautiful, so can you. I swear I thought she was pranking me, but the spark in her eyes told me otherwise. She truly believed that treating herself like that was the way. From then on, I started wearing foundation that was 2 shades too light for me, and always found a way to cover up the rest of my body. Not because I hated my brown skin or natural curls, but simply because it would make my parents happier. And after all, they were the people that birthed me. Fast forward 6 years later, I just graduated from the University of Florida, and when last Thanksgiving came around, I was feeling really good. I had taken up running and spent so much time outside that I was forced to embrace my natural wonder and beauty, and I loved it. And my boyfriend Carlos loved it too, lol. He was half Puerto Rican, half Italian, and very much familiar with the whole internalized racism thing, but he was also white passing, so I expected everything with my parents to be okay, until reality hit. I showed up at my parents' house with him holding my hand. I had even put on a slightly lighter foundation to lessen the blow of everything. When the door opened, I saw a woman who looked like my sister, except more depressed, deathly pale, and extremely skinny. My heart broke, and I guess hers did too, because as soon as she saw us, she cried out, "Dios mío, what are you doing to our bloodline?" My boyfriend instantly squeezed my hand as if to say, "It's okay, we got this." Meanwhile, tears were streaming down my face. "My love, what have you done to yourself?" My mom screamed while trying to undo my slick back bun and straighten it out with her fingers. And that's when she saw Carlos. Her mouth opened so wide, I thought her jaw was about to snap into two. "Ah, you almost had me believing that this monkey was actually your boyfriend, but I understand you're young, just messing around." She then chuckled to herself as if it was the funniest thing in the world. My dad then grabbed my hand to bring me inside and immediately handed my sister the skin whitening cream to put on my face. Except it wasn't the same one from when I was a child. Remember, this one hurt. "I stop, get away from me," I yelled, tears streaming down my face. Within seconds, blisters had filled my face and I was peeling all over. As I screamed, Carlos called the hospital. I figured by this point my parents would realize they were being idiots. But no, my dad tried to wrestle with Carlos to grab the phone from him. "Pain is beauty. Armida will be beautiful." Meanwhile, my entire face felt like it had been dipped in hot sauce over 100 times. Luckily, they still arrived, and by the time I was seen by nurses, my eyebrows had already been burnt off. The next morning when I woke up from the skin grafting procedure, I was faced with my boyfriend kissing my hand and calling me beautiful, until I checked my phone. I immediately noticed I had been bombarded with dozens of texts and missed calls. The first voicemail was angry, telling me I was a disappointment to the family. The second was threatening. By the 10th, my sister was begging to not press charges. "They're our parents," she said in the message. "They just want what's best for us. Please come home and we can fix this." I couldn't believe she was still defending them after everything. Her voice sounded hollow, defeated, like someone who had given up fighting long ago. Carlos sat with me as I listened to the messages, his face growing more concerned with each one. "Layla," he said quietly, "this isn't normal. What they did to you is abuse. It's always been abuse." He held my hand gently, careful not to disturb the IV line. I knew he was right, but hearing him say it out loud made something click inside me. All these years, I'd been trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I'd been letting them hurt me, physically and emotionally, because I thought that's what family meant. I'd normalized their behavior, made excuses for their cruelty, and blamed myself for not being what they wanted. The hospital social worker came in later that day. She asked about my burns, and for the first time in my life, I told someone the whole truth about my family. I can't tell you what I did next in this short video. Full story on the channel, link below. I was still in the hospital when I decided to press charges. The social worker helped me file a police report, and honestly, I was terrified. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely sign the paperwork. The officer who took my statement was this older guy named Officer Ramirez who kept looking at me with these sad eyes, like he'd seen this kind of thing before. "You're doing the right thing," he told me while I described the years of abuse. Not gonna lie, I almost backed out like 50 times during that conversation. There's this weird guilt that comes with reporting your own parents, even when they've literally burned your face off with illegal skin bleach. Carlos stayed with me the whole time. He held my hand through all the questioning and brought me real food because hospital food is straight trash. The nurses kept calling him my husband, and neither of us corrected them. It felt nice, like a glimpse into a future where I had a real family that actually cared about me. My phone kept blowing up with messages from my parents and sister. I eventually just turned it off because reading them was making my blood pressure spike, which the doctor said wasn't great for my recovery. My mom switched between threatening me and begging me to come home. My dad sent these long paragraphs about family loyalty and how I was betraying my heritage by acting like this. The irony of him talking about heritage while literally trying to bleach it off my skin wasn't lost on me. The worst messages were from my sister Elena. "They're going to take me away if you do this," she texted. "Please, Layla, I need them. I don't know how to live any other way." That one hit me hard. I knew exactly what she meant. When your whole identity is built around pleasing someone else, the thought of losing that structure is terrifying. I got discharged after 3 days. My face was still bandaged, and I looked like a mummy from some low-budget horror movie. The doctor said I'd need follow-up appointments for the next few months to make sure the skin grafts were healing properly. They also gave me this special cream that cost more than my monthly rent. Thank God for Carlos's insurance that covered most of it. We went straight to Carlos's apartment. I couldn't face going back to my place knowing my parents might show up there. Carlos lived in this tiny one-bedroom near campus with mismatched furniture and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it felt safer than anywhere I'd lived before. That first night away from the hospital, I had a complete breakdown. I'm talking ugly crying, snot everywhere, the works. Carlos just held me and let me get it all out. I kept saying how I should have done something sooner, how I should have protected Elena, how maybe I was overreacting. Carlos just listened, occasionally wiping my tears away carefully to avoid the bandages. You know what the craziest part is? I told him around 3 a.m. when we were both still awake. A part of me still wants them to love me. How messed up is that? The next morning, I woke up to a knock on the door. Carlos went to check while I hid in the bedroom, terrified it might be my parents. It wasn't them. It was Officer Ramirez with another officer I hadn't met before. We've spoken with your parents, Ramirez said when I finally came out. They're claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that you had an allergic reaction to a normal beauty product. I just stared at him. Of course they would say that. They'd been covering up their abuse for years with excuses like that. The new officer, a woman named Officer Chen, asked if I had any evidence of the previous abuse. Did I have pictures of the slap marks? Had I ever reported it before? Did I have the packaging from the product they used on me? I didn't have any of that. Who takes pictures of their abuse when they're a kid? Who keeps the empty bottles of the stuff that hurts them? I started panicking, thinking they wouldn't believe me, that my parents would get away with it like they always had. Then Carlos spoke up. The hospital has the chemical analysis of what was on her face. That should prove it wasn't a normal beauty product. Officer Chen nodded and made a note. We'll get that report. In the meantime, we've issued a temporary restraining order. Your parents can't contact you or come near you. After they left, I checked my phone again. 17 missed calls from my mom, 12 from my dad, and 23 from Elena, plus a bunch of texts. The most recent one from Elena made my stomach drop. They're saying you're mentally unstable, that you've always made up stories for attention. They have pictures of you looking happy at family events to prove it. I showed Carlos the message. They're going to twist everything, I said. They'll make it look like I'm the crazy one. Carlos suggested I reach out to anyone who might have witnessed the abuse over the years. My mind immediately went to my old neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who used to let me hide in her apartment sometimes when things got bad at home. There was also my high school counselor, Mr. Thompson, who had noticed the makeup I wore to cover bruises once but didn't push when I made up an excuse about falling. I spent the next few days making calls while trying to heal. Most people remembered something off about my family, but nothing specific enough to help. Mrs. Patel had moved to Arizona. Mr. Thompson vaguely recalled being concerned, but had no documentation. I was starting to lose hope when I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Jasmine from college. Carlos gave me your number. I have pictures from freshman year when you still had those chemical burns on your neck from home. Let me know if they would help. I'd completely forgotten about those pictures. Jasmine had taken them during a dorm party when my makeup had rubbed off. I'd been mortified at the time and begged her to delete them, but apparently she never did. I called her immediately, and she promised to send them over. Meanwhile, Carlos was being a total rock star. He rearranged his work schedule to drive me to doctor appointments, cooked actual meals instead of the ramen I'd been living on, and never once complained about the fact that his tiny apartment now had my stuff everywhere. One night, I caught him researching skincare for chemical burn recovery when he thought I was asleep. About a week after I filed the report, I got a call from a woman named Danielle who introduced herself as a victim advocate from the district attorney's office. She explained that they were considering pressing charges against my parents but needed more information. We have the hospital records and the chemical analysis, she said. The substance on your face contained hydroquinone at levels far exceeding legal limits, plus mercury compounds that are banned in cosmetics in the US. I wasn't surprised. My parents had always sought out the strongest, most dangerous products, believing they were more effective. What had surprised me was when Danielle said, "We also have a statement from your sister." My heart stopped. Elena made a statement against our parents? There was a pause on the line. Not exactly. She's supporting their version of events. Says you've always been jealous of her relationship with your parents and that you're making up the abuse for attention. I hung up and threw my phone across the room. Carlos jumped up from where he'd been working on his laptop and came over to me. I told him what Danielle had said, and he just held me while I cried again. I was so tired of crying. She's scared, Carlos said. She's still living with them, right? She's doing what she needs to survive. I knew he was right, but it still hurt like hell. Elena had been there for everything. She'd experienced the same abuse I had, sometimes worse. How could she deny it now? The next day, I decided to try something different. I called Elena directly instead of texting. To my surprise, she answered, "Layla, you need to drop this," she said immediately, her voice low like she was trying not to be overheard. "They're really angry. Dad broke the coffee table yesterday. I've never seen him like this." I took a deep breath. "Elena, they hurt us. They're still hurting you. Look at yourself. When was the last time you ate a full meal or slept through the night?" "I'm fine," she snapped. "I'm beautiful. Everyone says so." "You're disappearing," I said softly. "Every time I see you, there's less of you there." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to be any other way." "Neither did I told her. "But I'm learning. You can too." She hung up after that. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message telling her I loved her and that there was a place for her at Carlos's apartment if she ever needed it. The case against my parents moved slowly. There were interviews and paperwork and more interviews. The district attorney decided to charge them with assault and child endangerment based on the recent incident, but the years of past abuse were harder to prove. Danielle explained that without documentation or witnesses, it would be my word against theirs. Carlos suggested I start writing everything down, every incident I could remember, with as many details as possible. "Even if it doesn't help the case," he said, "it might help you process everything." So I did. I bought this cheap notebook from the campus bookstore and started filling it with memories. The time my mom slapped me so hard my nose bled because I'd played in the sprinklers at a friend's house. The Christmas my dad gave Elena a gold necklace and me a bottle of skin lightening lotion. The countless mornings spent having my hair painfully straightened while being told how ugly my natural curls were. Writing it all down was like lancing a wound. It hurt, but the poison needed to come out. Some nights I could only manage a paragraph before I had to stop. Other times I'd write for hours, the pages getting wet with tears. About 3 weeks after the Thanksgiving incident, I got another unexpected call. It was from my Aunt Rosa, my mom's sister who lived in Miami. We weren't close. She'd moved to Florida when I was young, and we only saw her at major family events. "Layla, I just heard what happened," she said. Her accent was thicker than I remembered. "Your mother called me crying, saying you were making up terrible lies about them." My stomach sank. Great, now they were rallying the extended family against me. "It's not lies, Tia. They've been abusing me and Elena for years." There was a pause. Then Aunt Rosa said something that changed everything. I know. 2 simple words, but they hit me like a truck. "You know, I suspected," she clarified. "The way your mother was always obsessed with your appearance, how you girls never seem to play outside like normal children." I asked her about it once, and she got so defensive I never brought it up again. I should have done more. I sat down on Carlos's couch, my legs suddenly weak. "Why are you calling me now?" "Because I believe you," she said, "and because I found something. When your mother and I were growing up, our grandmother did similar things to her. I found old diaries of your mother's where she wrote about it. The skin bleaching, the obsession with looking more European. It was done to her too. This revelation didn't excuse what my parents had done, but it helped me understand it a little better. The cycle of abuse had started long before I was born. My mother had internalized her own grandmother's racism and passed it on to us. Aunt Rosa offered to send me the diaries and to testify if needed. She also said I could stay with her in Miami if I needed to get further away from my parents. I thanked her but told her I was okay staying with Carlos for now. The next day, I had another follow-up appointment at the dermatologist. The doctor seemed pleased with how my face was healing. The redness was fading and the new skin was growing properly. There would be some scarring, but less than they initially feared. "You're lucky," the doctor said as she examined me. "This could have been much worse." As we were leaving the clinic, I spotted a familiar figure figure in the parking lot. Elena was leaning against a car, looking even thinner than the last time I'd seen her. When she saw us, she straightened up and walked over hesitantly. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. "I followed Mom's car when she went grocery shopping," she said. "I knew you had an appointment today. I saw it on the calendar at home." Carlos stood slightly behind me, a protective presence but giving us space to talk. Elena glanced at him nervously before focusing back on me. "I've been thinking about what you said," she whispered, "about disappearing. I looked in the mirror this morning and couldn't recognize myself. I wanted to hug her, but she flinched when I moved closer." "Elena, you can get help. You can get out like I did." She shook her head frantically. "I can't. They're watching me all the time now. Dad took my phone. I'm using Mom's while she's shopping." She looked over her shoulder anxiously. "I don't have anywhere to go. You can stay with us," Carlos said immediately. "We'll make room." Elena looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. The idea of someone offering help without expecting anything in return seemed to confuse her. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. You're Layla's sister," he said simply, as if that explained everything. And I guess for him, it did. Elena started to respond when her phone buzzed. She checked it and her face went pale. "Mom's done shopping. I have to go." She turned to leave, then stopped and handed me a small USB drive. "I found this in Dad's office. It's their financial records. They've been ordering that skin bleach from overseas for years. It's all there, the payments, the shipping information." I took the drive, stunned. "Elena, this could be really important for the case." "I know," she said. "That's why I took it." She started walking away, then called over her shoulder. "I'll try to come to your place tomorrow. Text me the address." As we watched her hurry across the parking lot, Carlos squeezed my hand. "She's stronger than she thinks." "We both are," I replied. That night, we looked through the files on the USB drive. Elena had been right. There were years of records showing regular purchases of illegal skin lightening products from suppliers in Africa and Asia. Some of the ingredients listed were terrifying. Mercury compounds, high-concentration hydroquinone, even something called clobetasol propionate that a quick Google search revealed was a prescription-strength steroid never meant for long-term use on the face. I immediately called Danielle and told her about the new evidence. She seemed excited, saying this could strengthen their case significantly. She arranged for me to bring the drive to her office the next morning. I was nervous about Elena coming to Carlos's place. What if our parents followed her? What if she changed her mind? Carlos suggested we clean up a bit and make sure there was food she might like. I remembered she used to love quesadillas before she started severely restricting her eating, so we got ingredients for that. The next day passed with no sign of Elena. I texted the number she'd called from, but got no response. By evening, I was pacing around Carlos's apartment, convinced something had happened to her. Maybe she couldn't get away, Carlos suggested. Or maybe she's scared. Just as we were about to give up and eat dinner without her, there was a soft knock at the door. Carlos checked the people and quickly opened it. Elena stood there, a small backpack clutched to her chest, her face even paler than usual. "They know I took the drive," she said as soon as she was inside. "Dad was looking for it everywhere. When he couldn't find it, he started screaming at Mom, saying she must have moved it. I left while they were fighting." I hugged her, and this time she didn't pull away. She felt so fragile in my arms, like a bird with hollow bones. "You're safe now," I told her, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. Carlos made quesadillas while I helped Elena settle in. We didn't have much space, but we'd cleared out a corner of the living room and set up an air mattress with clean sheets and blankets. Elena looked at this simple setup like it was a luxury hotel room. "I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in years," she admitted as she sat on the edge of the mattress. "Mom said beautiful people don't need much sleep." "Well, tonight you can sleep as long as you want," I told her. No alarms. We ate dinner together, and I noticed Elena taking tiny bites and pushing food around her plate to make it look like she'd eaten more than she had. I didn't comment on it. Recovery would take time for both of us. After dinner, Elena took a shower. When she came out wearing one of Carlos's t-shirts that hung like a dress on her thin frame, I noticed bruises on her arms that hadn't been visible before. "Did they hurt you when they found out about the drive?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Elena looked down at the marks like she was seeing them for the first time. "Dad grabbed me. He does that sometimes when he's angry." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. I took pictures of the bruises with my phone. More evidence. Then I helped Elena apply some of my healing cream to them. We sat together on the air mattress afterward, neither of us quite knowing what to say. "I'm sorry I told them you were lying," she finally whispered. "I was scared." "I know," I said. "You don't need to apologize." She fell asleep quickly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. I covered her with an extra blanket and joined Carlos in his bedroom. We talked in low voices about what to do next. Having Elena with us changed things. Now we needed to protect her too. The next morning, I called Danielle again to update her on the situation. She suggested bringing Elena in to make her own statement now that she was away from our parents. Elena agreed, though she was clearly terrified. "What if they don't believe me either?" she asked as we drove to the district attorney's office. "What if they think I'm making it up too?" "The bruises help," I said, hating that I had to say those words. "And we have the financial records now?" Elena's interview lasted over 2 hours. Carlos and I waited outside, neither of us speaking much. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red from crying, but she looked somehow lighter, like setting down a heavy backpack after carrying it for miles. "They believe me," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're going to add charges based on what happened to me too." Danielle came out after her and explained that with Elena's testimony and the financial records, they now had a much stronger case. They were adding charges of child abuse, child endangerment, and assault for both of us, plus additional charges related to importing illegal substances. "We'll be requesting a court date soon," she said. "Both of you will likely need to testify." The thought of facing our parents in court made my stomach churn, but I nodded. "We'll be ready." That afternoon, we got a call from Officer Ramirez. Our parents had been arrested. They were being held pending bail, which had been set high enough that they probably couldn't pay it immediately. The news should have made me feel safer, but instead, I just felt hollow. Elena had a different reaction. When I told her, she burst into tears. Not sad tears, but something closer to relief. "It's really over?" she kept asking. "They can't make me go back?" "It's really over," I confirmed, holding her as she cried. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, therapy appointments, which Danielle had arranged for both of us, and adjusting to our new living situation. Carlos's tiny apartment was cramped with 3 people, but we made it work. Elena slept on the air mattress, I took the couch, and Carlos kept his bed. He never complained, not even when Elena had nightmares that woke us all up, or when I accidentally used his toothbrush. Elena's physical health was concerning. Years of sleep deprivation and restricted eating had taken a serious toll. We found a doctor who specialized in eating disorders, and she started seeing him twice a week. The first time she ate a full meal without calculating calories or checking her skin tone afterward, she cried. My face continued to heal. The dermatologist was pleased with my progress, though she warned me to be extremely careful about sun exposure on the new skin. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being punished for sun exposure, now I had a legitimate medical reason to avoid it. Our parents were eventually released on bail with strict orders not to contact us. They violated those orders almost immediately, sending emails from new accounts and even having friends call us with messages. Danielle helped us document every violation, which she said would only strengthen the case against them. Christmas came and went. It was the first holiday I'd ever spent away from my parents, and while there was some sadness, there was also a sense of freedom. Carlos's family invited us to their celebration, and his mom made traditional Puerto Rican dishes that reminded me of the food my grandmother used to make before she passed away. Elena ate more that day than I'd seen her eat in years. In January, we got notice that the trial was set for March. As the date approached, my anxiety skyrocketed. I started having panic attacks, sometimes waking up gasping for air, convinced I was back in my parents' house with burning chemicals on my face. Carlos suggested we all try something new to help manage the stress. He signed us up for a painting class at the community center. I was terrible at it. My trees looked like green blobs and my sunsets like someone had spilled orange juice on the canvas. But it was fun, and for those 2 hours each week, I didn't think about the trial or my parents or the scars on my face. Elena turned out to be surprisingly good at painting. Her first attempt at a landscape was actually decent, with mountains that looked like mountains in a sky with proper perspective. The instructor praised her work, and I watched my sister's face light up with genuine pride, maybe for the first time in her life. I never knew I could make something beautiful instead of just trying to be beautiful, she told me afterward. February brought an unexpected development. Aunt Rosa called to say she'd spoken with other family members about what had happened. To my shock, several cousins and another aunt came forward with their own stories about my parents' behavior. They'd seen things over the years, the excessive focus on our appearance, the way we flinched when our parents raised their hands, how we never wore short sleeves even in summer. They're willing to provide statements, Aunt Rosa said. They should have spoken up sooner, but they're trying to do the right thing now. These additional testimonies strengthened our case even further. Danielle seemed increasingly confident about the outcome, though she warned us that court cases can be unpredictable. As March approached, Elena made remarkable progress. She'd gained a healthy amount of weight and her hair was starting to look less brittle. She still struggled with sleep, often staying up late painting rather than setting an alarm to deliberately wake herself, but it was a step in the right direction. I was healing too, both physically and emotionally. The scars on my face were fading, though they'd never completely disappear. I'd started wearing my hair natural all the time, embracing the curls I'd been taught to hate. Carlos said they suited me, and I was beginning to agree. 1 week before the trial, we received an unexpected visitor. Our father's sister, Aunt Lucia, showed up at Carlos's apartment unannounced. Carlos was at work, so it was just me and Elena when she knocked. Your parents sent me, she said as soon as we opened the door. They want to make a deal. Elena started to close the door, but Aunt Lucia stuck her foot in the way. Just hear me out. They're willing to plead guilty to reduce charges if you agree not to testify. They'll pay for your medical bills, Layla, and they'll leave you both alone forever. I looked at Elena, whose face had gone pale again. We need to discuss this, I told Aunt Lucia. Come back tomorrow. After she left, Elena and I called Danielle immediately. She advised against accepting any deal without her present and said she'd come over that evening to discuss it. When Danielle arrived, she explained that our parents were likely getting nervous about the trial. The evidence against them is strong, she said. They're trying to minimize the consequences. What would happen if we agreed? Elena asked. Would they go to jail at all? Probably not, Danielle admitted. With reduced charges, they might get probation, community service, maybe a fine. I thought about everything they'd done to us over the years. The physical pain, the emotional scars, the years of teaching us to hate ourselves. That doesn't seem like enough, I said. It's your decision, Danielle told us. But remember, testifying means facing them in court. It means having your story questioned by their lawyer. It can be traumatic. Elena and I stayed up late that night talking about it. Part of me wanted to take the deal, to avoid seeing our parents again, to just move on with my life, but another part needed them to face real consequences. What do you want to do? I asked Elena around midnight. She was quiet for a long time before answering. I want them to know they didn't break us. I want to look them in the eye and tell my story. The next day, when Aunt Lucia returned, we gave her our answer. No deal. We would testify. The week before the trial was tense. I had trouble sleeping, and even Carlos seemed on edge. Elena threw herself into painting, creating dark, swirling images that somehow captured exactly how I was feeling. The night before the trial, Carlos cooked us a special dinner. He'd made his grandmother's recipe for arroz con gandules and even bought a bottle of sparkling cider so we could toast. No matter what happens tomorrow, he said, raising his glass. You two are the bravest people I know, and whatever the outcome, we'll face it together. I looked at my sister across the table, at Carlos beside me, and felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Whatever happened in court the next day, we had already won something important. We had broken the cycle, we had found our voices, we had started to heal. As we clinked our glasses together, I knew that facing our parents in court would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing the hard things alone. The morning of the trial arrived with a spring thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the windows as we got dressed in the nicest clothes we owned. Carlos wore a button-up shirt and tie. I put on a simple blue dress that showed my natural skin tone. Elena chose a yellow sundress that made her look younger, more vulnerable, but also somehow stronger. We drove to the courthouse in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into the parking lot, I spotted our parents walking toward the entrance, huddled under a large black umbrella. My mother wore a hat pulled low over her face, as if trying to hide. My father walked stiffly beside her, his back ramrod straight. Are you ready? Carlos asked, turning off the engine. I looked at Elena, who nodded slightly. As ready as we'll ever be, I replied. We walked into the courthouse together, ready to tell our story, ready to face our past, so we could finally move toward our future. I walked into that courtroom feeling like I might throw up. My hands were shaking so bad I had to shove them in my pockets to hide it. Carlos kept his arm around my shoulders the whole time, and Elena stayed glued to my other side. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Nothing like those fancy ones you see on TV shows. Just a regular room with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and a judge's bench at the front. Our parents were already seated on the other side with their lawyer, this slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. My mom had her hair pulled back tight and was wearing more makeup than usual, probably trying to cover how stressed she was. My dad just stared straight ahead, not even looking our way. I couldn't tell if he was ignoring us on purpose or just couldn't face us. Danielle met us at our table and went over some last-minute details. Remember, just tell the truth, she said. Don't let their lawyer rattle you. The judge came in and everyone stood up. He was this older white guy with thick glasses and a serious expression. He explained the charges and the process, but honestly, I was so nervous I barely heard any of it. I just kept staring at my parents, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally could have hurt me so badly. My mom testified first. She sat in the witness stand looking all innocent, talking about how she just wanted her daughters to have the best opportunities in life. In our culture, lighter skin opens doors, she said with this sad smile. I only wanted them to succeed. Their lawyer asked if she ever intended to harm us. Of course not, she said, looking shocked at the very suggestion. Everything I did was out of love. The product that caused Layla's reaction was just a new brand we were trying. How could I have known she would be allergic? When it was Danielle's turn to question her, things got real. Danielle pulled up the financial records Elena had found, showing years of purchases of illegal skin bleaching products. Mrs. Mendez, can you explain why you were importing chemicals that are banned in the United States due to their toxicity? My mom's face changed then. Her fake smile disappeared, and she started stumbling over her words. They work better than the American products. Everyone in Honduras uses them. Even though they contain mercury and other toxic substances, Danielle pressed. Beauty requires sacrifice, my mom said, and I swear the whole courtroom went silent. It was like she'd finally said out loud what she truly believed. My dad's testimony wasn't much better. He tried to play the strict but loving father role, talking about how he just wanted us to have better lives than he did. But when Danielle showed pictures of my chemical burns and Elena's bruises, he couldn't explain them away. The worst part was when their lawyer tried to paint me as the problem. He brought up times I'd acted out as a teenager, staying out late, arguing with my parents, normal teenage stuff, and tried to suggest I was making up the abuse because I was rebellious. Isn't it true that you've always been jealous of your sister's natural beauty? He asked me when it was my turn to testify. I almost laughed. No, I said. I've always been jealous that she was willing to destroy herself to earn our parents' love, and I wasn't. That shut him up for a second. Testifying was harder than I expected. I had to describe in detail all the things they'd done to us over the years. The slaps for sun exposure, the skin bleaching sessions, the constant criticism of our natural features. With each example, I could see the judge's expression growing more disturbed. When I described the Thanksgiving incident, I couldn't hold back tears. They held me down and put chemicals on my face that burned off my eyebrows and caused second-degree burns, I said. And while I was screaming in pain, they tried to stop my boyfriend from calling an ambulance. The defense tried to suggest I was exaggerating, but the hospital records and photos backed up everything I said. Elena's testimony was even more powerful. She was so thin and fragile looking on the stand, her voice barely above a whisper at first. But as she started describing what our parents had done, she got stronger. She talked about the sleep deprivation, the starvation, the constant pressure to be whiter, straighter haired, less Hispanic. I thought it was normal, she said. I thought all parents treated their children this way. It wasn't until I saw how Layla was healing once she got away that I realized what they were doing to us was wrong. When Elena described how our dad had grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises after discovering the missing financial records, I saw my mom actually flinch. Maybe she hadn't known about that part, or maybe she was just worried about how it looked to the judge. The trial lasted 3 days. By the end, I was emotionally exhausted. Carlos had taken time off work to be there for every minute, and I don't think I could have gotten through it without him. He brought us snacks during breaks, squeezed my hand when testimony got tough, and kept reminding me why we were doing this. On the final day, we heard closing arguments. The defense lawyer tried to paint our parents as well-meaning immigrants who just wanted their daughters to assimilate into American culture. Perhaps their methods were misguided, he admitted, but their intentions were good. Danielle's closing argument was much more direct. This case isn't about cultural differences, she said. It's about two parents who systematically abused their children, causing physical and psychological harm that will take years to heal. They imported illegal toxic chemicals to use on their daughter's skin and hair. They punished them for their natural appearance. They created an environment where their daughters believed their worth was determined solely by how white they could appear. She held up the photos of my chemical burns again. This isn't love, this is abuse. Plain and simple. When the judge announced he was ready to deliver his verdict, I grabbed Elena's hand so tight I probably cut off her circulation. Carlos put his arm around both of us. In the case of State versus Mendez, the judge began, I find the defendants guilty on all counts. I burst into tears, not sad tears, but relief tears. Elena was crying too, her whole body shaking. Carlos just held us both, his own eyes suspiciously wet. The judge sentenced our parents to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months, plus 5 years of probation after release. They would also have to pay for all our medical expenses and undergo mandatory counseling. A restraining order would remain in effect, preventing them from contacting us without our explicit permission. As the bailiff led them away, my mom looked back at us. For a second, I thought I saw regret in her eyes, but then she turned away, her back stiff with pride or anger. I couldn't tell which. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Apparently, our case had attracted some local attention because of the unusual nature of the abuse. Danielle helped us navigate past them without having to make any statements. We weren't ready to talk publicly about what had happened. That night, we had a small celebration at Carlos's apartment. Nothing fancy, just pizza and ice cream, but it felt like the most important meal of my life. Elena ate a whole slice of pizza without checking calories or worrying about how it would affect her appearance. I wore my hair in its natural curls and a tank top that showed my brown skin. Small victories, but they meant everything. What happens now? Elena asked as we sat around the living room. Whatever we want, I said, and it felt true for the first time in my life. The next few months were a period of adjustment. With the trial behind us, we had to figure out what our new normal looked like. Carlos's apartment was too small for 3 people long term, so we started looking for a bigger place. Elena got a part-time job at an art supply store, which seemed to help her confidence. I focused on finishing my final semester at university. We both continued with therapy. Some days were harder than others. I still had nightmares about the Thanksgiving incident, and Elena struggled with her body image and eating habits, but we were making progress. One unexpected bright spot was our relationship with Aunt Rosa. She visited from Miami a few times and even offered to help us financially if we needed it. I should have done more when you were children, she told us. Let me help now. With her assistance and our own savings, we found a small 2-bedroom apartment closer to campus. Carlos helped us move in, though he kept his own place. You two need your space, he said, though he stayed over often enough that it felt like he lived with us anyway. About 6 months after the trial, I got a letter from my mom. It had been screened by her prison counselor, who added a note saying they thought it might be part of her rehabilitation process to communicate with us, but that we were under no obligation to respond. I stared at that envelope for 3 days before I finally opened it. Inside was a single page covered in my mom's neat handwriting. Layla, it began. I am writing to say I am sorry. The counselor here is helping me understand what I did to you, and Elena was wrong. I was raised the same way by my grandmother, but that is no excuse. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you cannot. There was more, but it was all pretty much the same. Apologies mixed with explanations that sounded like excuses. I showed it to Elena, who read it silently before handing it back. Do you believe her? She asked. I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe she's starting to get it. Maybe she's just saying what her counselor wants to hear. Are you going to write back? I thought about it for a long time. Not yet, I finally decided. Maybe someday, but I'm not ready. Elena nodded. Me neither. We didn't hear from our dad at all. According to Aunt Rosa, who visited them once in prison, he was still angry and unrepentant. He blamed me for turning Elena against them and ruining their family. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. Life went on. I graduated with my degree in psychology, inspired partly by my own experiences to help others dealing with family trauma. Elena started taking classes at the community college, focusing on art therapy. She was still fragile in some ways, but getting stronger every day. Carlos and I got more serious. He proposed on my birthday, almost exactly a year after the Thanksgiving incident. Nothing fancy, just a simple question while we were walking through the botanical gardens on campus. I said yes immediately. We decided on a long engagement, giving ourselves time to build our careers before getting married. 2 years after the trial, our parents were released on parole. Danielle called to let us know, assuring us that the restraining order was still in effect and that their parole officer was aware of the situation. I had a panic attack that night, terrified they would show up at our door despite the order. Carlos stayed over, sleeping on our couch just to make us feel safer, but they didn't come. According to Aunt Rosa, they'd moved to a different part of the state. My mom had written a few more letters over the years, each one a little more insightful than the last. I'd finally written back once, a short note letting her know I was okay but not ready for more communication. Elena had never responded to any of her letters. 3 years after the trial, Carlos and I got married in a small ceremony at a local park. Elena was my maid of honor, looking healthy and beautiful in a dress that complemented her natural skin tone. Aunt Rosa came from Miami, bringing several cousins who had provided statements for our case. Carlos's large, loud family welcomed us with open arms, his mother treating me and Elena like the daughters she never had. We didn't invite our parents. I thought about it, even discussed it with my therapist, but ultimately decided I wasn't ready to see them face to face. Maybe someday, but not yet. The wedding was everything I dreamed of as a little girl, not because it was fancy or expensive, but because I was surrounded surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I looked like. I wore my hair in its natural curls, adorned with small white flowers. My makeup was minimal, letting my natural skin tone shine through. The scars from the chemical burns were still visible if you looked closely, but I didn't try to hide them. They were part of my story. Elena caught the bouquet, blushing when Carlos's cousin Ralph immediately asked her to dance. They'd been circling each other for months, both too shy to make a move. It was nice to see her opening up to the possibility of romance. She'd been so focused on healing that she hadn't dated at all since we left our parents' house. As Carlos and I swayed on the dance floor for our first dance, I looked around at the life we'd built. It wasn't perfect. We still had struggles and bad days, but it was real and honest and ours. What are you thinking about? Carlos asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. Just how far we've come, I said. 3 years ago, I was in a hospital with chemical burns, and Elena was starving herself to please our parents. Now look at us. He smiled, spinning me gently. You're the strongest person I know, you know that? I laughed. I don't feel strong most days. That's what makes you strong, he said. You keep going anyway. After the wedding, life settled into a comfortable routine. Carlos and I bought a small house with a yard where I could garden. I loved getting my hands dirty, feeling the sun on my skin without counting the minutes until punishment. Elena moved into her own apartment near the community college where she was now teaching art classes. She was still in therapy, still working through her issues with food and body image, but she was thriving in ways I never thought possible. On the 5th anniversary of the Thanksgiving incident, I received another letter from my mom. This one was different from the others. There were no excuses, no attempts to explain away what they'd done, just a simple acknowledgement of the harm they'd caused and a request. If you are ever willing, I would like to see you and Elena again, on your terms, in a place where you feel safe. I understand if the answer is no. I showed the letter to Elena during our weekly sister dinner. She read it carefully, her expression unreadable. What do you think? I asked. She sighed. I don't know. Part of me never wants to see them again, but another part wants closure, I suggested. She nodded. Something like that. We discussed it for weeks, with each other and with our therapists. Eventually, we decided to meet our mom, just her, not our dad, in a public place with Carlos present for support. We chose a coffee shop near our therapist's office, figuring we might need a session afterward. The day of the meeting, I was so nervous I could barely function. Carlos drove us because my hands were shaking too much. Elena was quiet beside me, her face pale but determined. Our mom was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug. She looked older, her hair showing streaks of gray she hadn't colored. When she saw us, she stood up but didn't approach, respecting the boundaries we'd set in our email. Thank you for coming, she said as we sat down across from her. Carlos positioned himself at the end of the table, a protective presence without being intrusive. The conversation was awkward at first. Small talk felt ridiculous given our history, but diving straight into the heavy stuff seemed too abrupt. Eventually, our mom took a deep breath and addressed the elephant in the room. I want you both to know that I understand now how wrong I was, she said. The counseling in prison and after. It helped me see what I did to you, what your father and I did. There's no excuse. Elena stared at her coffee. Why did you do it? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why did you hate how we looked so much? Our mom's eyes filled with tears. I didn't hate you. I hated myself. My own grandmother did the same to me, and I thought I was helping you avoid the pain I felt, but instead, I caused it. We talked for almost 2 hours. It wasn't magical or perfect. There were awkward silences and moments when emotions ran too high to continue, but it was honest in a way our family had never been before. Before we left, our mom asked if we might be willing to meet again sometime. No pressure, she added quickly. And I understand if you don't want to include your father. He's still working through things. Elena and I exchanged glances. Maybe, I said. We'll think about it. As we walked back to the car, Carlos asked how we were feeling. Weird, Elena said. Like, I'm glad we did it, but I also kind of want to go home and cry for hours. Same, I agreed. It's like, I don't know if I can ever fully forgive her, but I think I understand her a little better now. We did meet with our mom again, a few months later. And then again after that. Slowly, carefully, we built a new kind of relationship. Not the close mother-daughter bond that might have been, but something honest and respectful. She never asked us to see our father, and we never offered. Life continued to move forward. Carlos and I had our first child, a daughter we named Rosa, after my aunt who had been the first family member to believe us. Elena became the world's most devoted aunt, spoiling her niece with handmade toys and tiny paintings for her nursery. The first time my mom met Rosa was another milestone in our healing journey. I watched her carefully as she held my daughter, looking for any sign that she might judge her appearance or show the same toxic behavior she displayed with us. But she just cooed and smiled, telling Rosa she was perfect exactly as she was. She is, I agreed, taking my daughter back. And she always will be, no matter what she looks like. My mom nodded, understanding the message beneath my words. Yes, she said quietly, she will be. 7 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, Elena and Ralph got married in a beachside ceremony. She wore a sleeveless dress that showed her natural skin tone, her hair in loose curls down her back. She looked healthy and strong and happy, a far cry from the malnourished, sleep-deprived girl she'd been when we escaped. During the reception, I found a quiet moment with her away from the celebration. Did you ever think we'd get here? I asked, gesturing around at the life we'd built, the family we'd chosen. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Never. I thought I'd spend my whole life trying to disappear. And now I'm trying to take up space, she said. The right kind of space. I hugged her, careful not to mess up her wedding hairdo. You're doing a pretty good job of it. As we rejoined the party, I caught sight of Carlos dancing with our daughter, now a toddler, standing on his feet as he moved around the floor. My heart felt so full it might burst. Our journey wasn't over. We still had scars, both visible and invisible. We still had days when the past felt too close, when memories ambushed us and left us struggling. But we had built something our parents never gave us. Unconditional love, acceptance of ourselves and each other, and the freedom to be exactly who we were meant to be. And that, more than anything, felt like victory.